Martin, without using words like sensational and unbelievable, can you describe that performance by Celtic?
I thought they played very, very well. Obviously got off a fantastic start. We're quick out of the blocks, usual old phrase. Well, we were terrific throughout the match. Absolutely brilliant. We had to weather a storm at 3-1. Delighted to get the other goal, but the whole team were absolutely fantastic.
Who was your most important player today?
No, every single one of them. They were absolutely fantastic. G'd up for the game, they were ready for it, and they were powerful. The whole team was powerful.
How have you managed to turn a team?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't. There's a long way to go. I genuinely mean this here. I'm delighted today. I'm delighted to have won the game. Players are couldn't possibly get carried away, because at the end of the day, Rangers are a top-class side. I mean it.
From the point of view that Celtic were not defending in all quarters last season, we saw examples that Chris Sutton coming back defending, Henrik Larsson. How have you managed to turn that round?
No, I say to you, I mean it. It's not turned round. We've played 5 games, only 33 more to go. We've got off to a decent start. The lads are full of confidence at this moment. But I tell you what, I'm looking forward to them. They're coming back off international duty, and then we've got Wraith Rovers, and we've got Hibs to look at.
How did you manage to turn? What have you done for Bobby Petta? And Chris Sutton as well, you spoke about confidence for him.
I had confidence for Chris Sutton. I know him inside out. Bobby Petta, I don't know. Bobby Petta's done it all himself.
And what about Henrik Larsson's performances? Does he get any? He seems to be getting better.
Absolutely world-class performance. Delighted for him. Delighted he's getting his fitness back. And you wouldn't believe it. I think there's some more to come from him.
Well, it's going to be an interesting season. Well done today, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Martin O'Neill being Martin O'Neill there in the aftermath of Celtic 6, Rangers 2. The year was 2000. It was the very early days in that year's Scottish Premier League. We've got Enda Coll and Stephen Doyle with us on the line today, because this is the Classic Game Club. We're going back to you, lads. I think probably your favourite sporting moment of all time. 2 Celtic fans here. Am I speaking out of turn there?
I would say so. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty much up there. I suppose the occasion of the 2003 UEFA Cup final would probably be up there, but forgetting about the match itself. But yeah, no, I think, as Enda says there, it's definitely probably the big moment for Celtic fans.
For sure. When you get back into that Martin O'Neill interview in a little while, I don't think much has changed over the last 20 years in terms of O'Neill's personality in dealing with the media. As I said at the top, it is Celtic 6, Rangers 2. That is the score of the game. The Demolition Derby, as it's known. The context around this game, for people coming to this, fairly new. You can watch the full thing back on YouTube, by the way. It's August 2000, as I say, brand new season. Rangers, Scottish champions. 11 of the previous 12 years. It is utter domination. The blue side of Glasgow is flying at this moment. But, as you heard there, Martin O'Neill is a Celtic manager. It is his first season in the hot seat. And things have started pretty well for him. As he said there, 5 games in. But this is the old firm. This is his first real test. Steve-O, we should just touch on this for a moment. And Enda, if you've got any memories as well. Around this time, it must have been incredibly tough to be a Celtic fan.
Yeah, definitely. Because as you said there, Rangers, they'd won 11 of the previous 12 titles. There was that, I suppose, a bit of a false dawn under Wim Jansen when he stopped the 10 in a row in the 97-98 season. I said that's probably one of the most important titles that Celtic ever won, because Celtic had obviously done the 9 in a row themselves, had been stopped doing the 10. And that is the magic number. As we know, Celtic are trying to achieve that again at the moment. But I think Wim Jansen stopping that was crucial. But Rangers still won 11 of the previous 12 titles. They dominated the 90s. And then, of course, they were dominating the Old Firm Derby as well in those at that period, because Celtic had lost 5, drawn 2 of the previous home meetings with Rangers. And they'd also in the previous season lost 3 times and drawn once against Rangers. And if you might have heard O'Neill alluding to Henrik Larsson getting his fitness back. It was the year as well after Henrik Larsson had that horrific leg break, and nobody kind of knew at that stage how good Larsson, or if he could be as good as he had been for Celtic up till that point.
Yeah, and do you have any memories of this? I presume it's hazy, if anything.
I'll be honest, this is more of a game that I remember from the folklore of it, really. So growing up in Donegal, obviously there's a big Celtic following, so this isn't a game I remember as a child, because I was 4.5, maybe 5 at the time.
Yeah, you'd be doing well to remember that.
So this is more of a game that I remember from watching it back, and obviously we'll get to the goal, but Henrik Larsson's goal in this game, his first one, and it is probably the most famous Old Firm goal ever, I would say. But for context, we were talking about the context of this game. So if anybody wants to imagine what it was to be a Celtic fan right now, just ask the Rangers fans right now, because this is basically like Celtic winning the league next year and then Rangers beating them 6-2 in the following season. And we all know that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it's important to point it out, Steve, like how outrageous the scoreline is. That, like, Celtic going out and smashing somebody by 6 goals at this point is probably a rare occurrence. But to do it to Rangers at this point, completely unexpected. Like, where were you when you were watching this? Were you in a pub somewhere? Were you at home watching this? What was the story?
Yeah, well, like, I've been obviously over the parkhead and all that kind of thing, but at that stage, like, I hadn't been to an Old Firm. We used to go and watch I had a really good old friend of mine, John Flynn from Kildare. I'd moved down to Kildare at this stage, and we used to go into Nace, or else down to Kill, our local down in Kill, the old house, to watch the Celtic games. It's funny when you kind of think back to these things, how life has changed just even in Ireland. At that stage, because I asked a few people about it on Twitter last week, at that stage the Holy Hour was still in operation on a Sunday. So between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, every Sunday afternoon the pubs would close because of the Holy Hour, or I don't know why they didn't call it the Holy 2 hours. But and what would happen was, all the big Scottish games were shown. It was either 12:30 or 1 o'clock kickoffs at that stage. So obviously the match would still be ongoing when the Holy Hour kicked in. So a lot of pubs would have to pull the blinds down, close the doors, and pretend that there was nothing going on, and hope that the guards wouldn't come along. I do actually remember one time, I won't mention which pub it was, but we were in one of these pubs that stayed serving during the Celtic game, and the guards did come in. We were all taken outside and all our names taken in notebooks, and we're told, don't you be in the pub again in the Holy Hour, lads. Jesus,
you've got a criminal record, Stephen Doyle.
Thankfully he wasn't there. There was no charges involved. But yeah, I actually think what Enda says is actually a really good point in trying to contextualise what it would be like to achieve a result like that. And, you know, Rangers fans are in the situation now that Celtic fans were back then. And as you said, Owen, you know, to go out and to batter Rangers with 6 goals scored was just incredible. And also, I suppose, to put into context, Celtic had gone through a couple of tough years, because after Janssen left, after winning a title in 97-98, we had a couple of disastrous managerial reigns with Josef Venglos and also John Barnes as well. But I suppose it is crucial to remember as well that there were some important players brought in during that time, the likes of Henrik Janssen, who was famous for £650,000, one of the greatest transfers in any football league. Also, you had Lubo Moravcik, who was brought in by Josef Venglos, and he was a crucial signing and played a big part in the start of the Martin O'Neill revolution at Parkhead. The other thing to remember, Owen, as well, is that while Rangers were spending big in the 90s, and, you know, it's emerged since that it wasn't all above board, but while they were spending big, Celtic weren't spending a lot of money, and they had a guy in charge of the club called Fergus McCann, and Fergus McCann got a lot of criticism at that time because he felt at the time it was better to invest money in the infrastructure of the club. So there was, like, you know, the extension of the capacity at Parkhead, which brought Celtic to just up under 60,000 capacity, because he felt that the more bums and seats that you had, the more money that the club made, and the more money then you could reinvest in players and that kind of thing. But at the time, he got a lot of criticism from the support for what he was trying to do with the club. But since then, and Fergus McCann has been lauded, and rightly so, over the last couple of seasons. He's been brought back to Parkhead, and he's got a massively warm welcome back from the fans. But that'll give you an idea what was going on at the time as well. Rangers were spending a lot of money. As we know, that season they spent, I think it was in the guts of 12 million, which was a lot of money at that time. People have to remember on the 3 Dutch players, Konteman, Rickson and Ronald de Boer. Of course, later on that season they bought Torrey Andre Flo for £12 million from Chelsea. But Celtic they started to open the coffers up a little bit. We know Chris Sutton, who I know we'll touch on a bit more, he was brought in for £6 million. And Mark Viduka obviously left Celtic. But there were a couple of more signings to come later down the road for Martin O'Neill, Alan Thompson, Didier Gatt, Brad Douglas, but they hadn't come in yet. But Chris Sutton was, I suppose, a big signing, will play a crucial role in that game, and the partnership with Henrik Larsson was going to become a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go through these starting teams, though, for this Old Firm derby in August 2000. We'll start with Celtic. You Jonathan Gould in goals. You Valgarin, Alan Stubbs, Stefan Mahy and Jackie McNamara. Bobby Petta as a fullback. I've got a feeling Bobby Petta is going to get a lot of mentions today. He was unbelievable in this game. Stilian Petrov, Paul Lambert, Lubo Moravcik, as you've mentioned, and then a front two, of course, of Henrik Larsson and Chris Sutton. The Rangers team then, Stefan Kloss in goals. You'd Fernando Rickson, as you've already mentioned. You'd Conterman, Amoruso, Tony Vidmar. Claudio Reyna started this game. Barry Ferguson was in midfield with him. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, Billy Dodds, Rod Wallace and Neil McCann. Then you look at the Rangers bench. Andrew Kanchelskis, Tugay, Peter Lovenkrands all come on and make appearances here. This is a deep Rangers squad. I think it speaks to what you're talking about there, Steve-O, in terms of the investment that Rangers have made. This is, on paper, an outstanding Rangers team, and clearly it was with all the honours they won over previous seasons. I want to start, though, lads, talking about the broadcast of this game, because it's interesting for anybody who's watched it on YouTube, and it's fantastic. First of all, it's perfect that Jim White is presenting Scottish Premier League coverage. It's the only way it should be, and it's the only way it should ever be on Sky Sports. You've got the Sky Sports player cam, you've got the fan jewels, which is a classic feature, and then my favourite part of the broadcast is you've got this heavy trance track over Charlie Nicholas's analysis at half-time and full-time.
It's fantastic stuff. Like, just look at how young Jim White looks. And then Charlie Nicholas with a full head of black hair doing the analysis afterwards. The camera work is fantastic. There's a Happy Mondays montage at the end with Happy Mondays playing in the background. And then you just have all the different graphics. The player zone or the player cam is one of my favourite ones, because it was an entirely useless system that nobody ever used. You just followed a player around the pitch for 15 minutes. It was like, do you know the feature in FIFA now where you be a pro and you can choose whether you can control the whole team or control your one player, and you're just following him around the pitch the whole time? That's kind of like what it was, except it was real life and it was useless. But what's interesting about that, and one thing we might touch on later on, is Reyna's goal for Rangers that goes over the line. When they're analysing that at half-time, they only have one camera angle, so they've been wasting all these camera angles on the absolutely pointless player cam.
Good point.
When they genuinely couldn't see if the ball was over the line because they only had one camera angle on it.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't even think of that. What a waste. Like, it's very, very unclear whether or not rain. I think it does go over the line, but there's really no way that they can make an educated guess at that in the studio. And Charlie Nicholas, I think, he actually says, we're not sure, so it shouldn't have been given. It's quite the broadcast, Steve-O. It's the player cam. Were you a fan of that or not?
Well, to be honest, though, we in the establishments we would have been drinking in, they didn't have that option to us. Right, he introduced the match at the start, saying a Sky Sports production in widescreen with dull surround sound, Sky Interactive, alternative camera options, and a full stats service. Amazing.
It's what a breakthrough! What a season! A brand new century, a brand new hope for Scottish football. It's brilliant stuff. I would love to go back and actually watch the fan duels. I'm not sure were you familiar with this, that if you press the rent button you can watch like fans actually commentating on the game. You can actually just forget the Sky Sports presenters and listen to some partisan commentary. That's what you wanted. Before we get into like certain categories and certain awards for this match, I want to just ask you what level of heat was present in this game? How much needle, in your view, like relative to the Old Firm, did you think we got from this 6-2 match? Because I thought, not that it was toned down a little bit, I thought the atmosphere was amazing. I thought there were some very, very hard challenges. But we've definitely seen worse, haven't we? We've definitely seen testier affairs between these two teams.
Yeah, we definitely have. But one thing that I was going to point out in the context of this game, and one thing that's actually quite interesting watching it back, is how many Rangers fans are actually in the stadium, because that's changed in recent years. The last couple of years, Celtic and Rangers have been in this sort of weird battle with letting fans into the stadium. So there's only, I think Steve might have the actual number, but there's a very, very limited amount of Rangers fans allowed in Celtic Park, and vice versa when it comes to the Old Firm. So it's very, very, it's kind of toned down when it comes to the atmosphere. It's not as heated as it used to be in this game, and that's probably one thing I noticed going into this game, that the atmosphere is really heated. But in terms of challenges, there were some really bad challenges in this game. I think one reason why the challenges these days might seem worse is because there's not one single good tackle in this match. The idea of tackling in this game is just kicking your man to the ground. There is no going for the ball. It's just pushing her over, shouldering the man, kneeing him down to the ground, whatever you can. So the tackles into the knees.
I actually disagree.
Don't seem as bad.
I disagree with that. In my notes, in fairness to these players, I have man and ball was fair game. Like, obviously, you're right. The number one aim was to murder your opposite man. That was number one aim of playing in this game. But in fairness, I think they tried to get the ball with the man as well. You're going to kill the man and puncture the ball or do whatever you need to do. But both were coming with you is the way I read this.
Yeah, well, you definitely had big men on the pitch as well. So that played a role in it. I mean, you had Amoruso and Majalbi as sort of the centre-back partnerships that are going up against each other, and they were absolutely huge. So if they are running into a small striker, then they're going to do damage regardless.
There's one very early on. I can't remember who he gets. Billy Dodds goes in, and you're like, okay, this is the terms of engagement here where he almost kills a man, and it's outrageous. There's one McCann versus McNamara at one stage. I think it's about 6 minutes into the game where there's absolutely no booking because I think the referee just can't make up his mind as to who is actually the worst offender here. It's like you see a man, you're running at him head on, prepare to get your studs up and just hope that your leg doesn't break in two. That's basically what the whole thing is.
I actually noticed that as well. It was Neil McCann. It was on Jackie McNamara 6 minutes in. Yeah, it was really early on. It was a horrible challenge. I think one of the goals from Celtic early on, it was the one that led to the corner. Bobby Petta rides like 3 or 4 really bad challenges as well. And the reason he stays up, and it actually works out in Celtic's favour. But yeah, it had some needle. But I would agree with you in your overall assessment that the recent derbies probably had a bit more needle in terms of bad challenges.
Well, yeah, I think that there's maybe the rule book was a little bit more flexible back in the time. If all of your studs happen to connect with somebody's shin, you might get away with it. You might get a yellow card or something like that. So I think people were allowed to express their violence within the rules a bit more, whereas nowadays, if you make one bad challenge, you're off the pitch and everything kind of escalates. Like, it is still remarkable, though, that it took 81 minutes for a red card in this game. Barry Ferguson obviously getting sent off for that one. One of the things that struck me, I don't think it is evident through the television. I'm not sure, Steve, if you've spoken to anybody who's actually at the game, but I've got a sneaky suspicion that the television just doesn't do this atmosphere justice whatsoever. I've got a feeling it was absolutely feral in there. That you had stuff being thrown at Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. A few minutes later, that was at a corner. A few minutes later, he completely overhits a corner and almost goes out for a throw at the opposite end. That he's getting completely rattled by the fans here. That it was a true, I hate the cliche, but it was a true definition of a 12th man on this occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I suppose you get a real sense of Celtic and the parquet atmosphere on those famous European nights. We all know Celtic are highly regarded, the supporters are highly regarded when it comes to their support for those big European nights. But those Saturday, Sunday afternoon games against Rangers, I've been there for big matches and once at Old Firm, and it really is hard to explain. It doesn't. The thing about it as well is that it doesn't come in waves. It's just like an intense cauldron of atmosphere for the full 90 minutes. They just don't. They do not let up. It's you do, as you say, on it is hard to actually get a real sense of it watching it on the screen, watching it on television. You actually have to be there, and it is a great Stainways design parquet, and that. It genuinely is like a cauldron the way it is designed. It doesn't go too far back. Everybody does. It feels like everybody's really on top of the players, on top of the pitch. And you're right. You don't get a proper sense of it. And I'd even say I think even the atmosphere. Enda might give you an opinion on this as well. I'd be interested to hear what he says. I think it might have changed even. I don't know if it's as good now for those games as it was maybe back 15 years ago.
Well, I was at probably the best atmosphere I was at a Champions League game in Celtic Park in 2008, and the atmosphere was electric. I think one thing that's changed is they've changed around where the Green Brigade stand. So obviously they have the safe standing now, and that's the atmospheric stand. But that they used to be in the Lisbon Lions stand, which is directly behind the goal. So it was almost like if you want to imagine the Bernabeu, where you have the wave of white behind the goal. That's kind of where the Green Brigade were, and that's where I was for that match, and the atmosphere was absolutely incredible. And I would probably agree with Steve's assessment is that in recent years, because all of the biggest fans that want to be in the singing section are isolated in that one stand, you don't get the same wraparound as you used to get where all the fans are sort of spread out across the stadium.
Yeah, it seems to have changed a bit down through the years. Let's get into some of the awards throughout the game. We start with moment of the match here on Classic Game Club. I dare say that we're just going to get into a few goals here, really. I'm struggling to get into my head what actually is the moment of the match, but it's impossible to not pick Henrik Larsson's chip, right? Has anybody not gone for that, I think, is probably the way of framing this question. Go on, Steve, what have you gone for?
Yeah, one thing I'd say is, look, you know, it is seriously, I don't use the word lightly, is an iconic moment in Scottish football, in Celtic's history, that Larsson goal. But the one thing, if you're going to look for a turning point, I think, in this game, because Martin O'Neill, you know, he said in his post-match press conference that they were under real pressure when the score went to 3-1. And they really had to battle hard to keep that score as it was going in at the break at half-time. And I think the Rod Wallace goal that was ruled offside in the 42nd minute, and obviously when you look back at it, it was incorrectly offside, an incorrect offside call. I think if Rangers had got that goal, and if that had been going in half-time, you could have had a totally different second half, because Rangers are then coming out psychologically. It would have been huge for Rangers going in. You know, they're thinking we were 3-0 down. Now we're only 3-2 down. We still have 45 minutes to rescue this game here. And I think that was, if you're looking for a turning point in the game, I think that goal being called offside was massive. Really, really good.
We sometimes forget that Rangers had more shots in the first half. Like, this was not a 3-1 scoreline at all, really, was it? Was it deserved?
I think they were the better side once Celtic won 3-0 up. I thought the last 15, 20 minutes of that first half, Rangers were the better team. They created a lot of chances. They got the one goal. It should have been two. And I think Celtic were under real pressure for that last 15, 20 minutes of the first half. Rangers definitely outplayed them.
Let's talk about this. Sorry, go on, Enda.
Sorry, I just wanted to say on that goal, we have to give a bit of appreciation towards Barry Ferguson's pass for that Rod Wallace goal. It was unbelievable. And it just shows you the quality that was in the SPL at that point in time. I would probably, if we're not going for the Larsson goal, I'd just like to chime in with mine. I was probably going to go for maybe Sutton's opening goal, because so much rides on the first 10 minutes in Old Firms. Like, often the first goal can be the only goal in the game, and to score after 51 seconds, to take that lead, especially in a game with such pressure, a game the Celtic needed to get something out of so badly, to take the lead so early and then double it again. They really had a grip on the game really early, so that would have been a big moment in that game for me. It also was a big moment for Sutton as well, who Martin O'Neill alluded to after the game was struggling for confidence. Before the game started, what was interesting was the commentary. They said, after experience in the North London, East Anglian derbies, it's about time Chris Sutton stopped pussyfooting around and discovered what the real thing is about. And so this was his debut in an Old Firm, and people would have really had the opinion of him that he was just a big man with no skill. So for him to get the opening goal in this game would have been a massive moment in it.
What's the best part of Henrik Larsson's goal, the chip? Is it the nutmeg that he perhaps means to do? Is it the finish itself? Like, is it the fact that he almost sends the goalkeeper the wrong direction on two different planes? I just can't make my mind. Is it Chris Sutton being a fantastic man to hold up the ball, this beautiful combination of Route 1 football and the guile of Henrik Larsson? There are so many different facets to this. You could break this down and write a thesis on this goal. It is one of the best goals possibly ever scored in Scottish football. As you say, Steve-O, it's not doing the word iconic and injustice to describe this as such. It is possibly the most famous goal in recent times in the Old Firm. It's just perfect. It is just perfect.
I actually I sent out a tweet there last week to say we were prepping for this, and when I watched the stuff, like, you know, I've got a couple of big heroes in football. On Paul McGrath would be one, and Henrik Larsson is definitely another. Like, I was obsessed with that man. I was in love with that man. He was. I could remember when, as a younger, I was only about 14, I think, when the '94 World Cup was on, and Henrik Larsson emerged in that World Cup with the Swedish team that got to the semi-final. And I was just struck by his dreadlocks, his movement, everything about him, he was perfect. And just when I started watching this game, and when they announced the teams and they showed Larsson warming up before the game kicked off, and just to see that shot of him from behind, the number 7, Larsson on the back, the dreadlocks, and I was just like, I got a shiver. I was just taking me back to all those games when I watched him playing and how amazing he was. And I was just absolutely obsessed and in love with that man. And everything about that goal is just quintessential Henrik Larsson. Like, as you mentioned, there's the brilliant cushioned header by Sutton from the Jonathan Gould kick out. Larsson, the first touch, it's almost like the ball's almost getting away from him. The second touch is amazing, where he retrieves it. Then, as you mentioned, the nutmeg, he absolutely makes a show of counterman, which just added so much to it. And then to have the intelligence, the game intelligence, and then that trademark celebration is running out with the tongue sticking out, the brilliant Celtic ball boys behind the goal jumping up and down, which is always a great thing.
Ball boys are amazing. Like, they hold nothing back.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just brilliant.
You don't want to overplay anything too much, but I wonder, lads, like, how responsible one individual can be for the allure of an entire league for a prolonged period of time, because we're getting to know, like, I'm getting to know, my awareness of football is starting to grow as Henrik Larsson's influence at Celtic is starting to grow, and just the fascination you would have with the man as a kid, it's almost in hindsight kind of a little bit of a disbelief that he was at Celtic for so long, that he was Celtic's thing. He was Glasgow Celtic's property for such a prolonged period of time, that you had this sustained number of years of greatness coming from the striker. It almost felt like it should have been something that was happening at Barcelona or at Real Madrid, and yet this was happening in Glasgow within the last 20 years. I just feel that people around the world were tuning in to watch this guy, and by extension, he had just brought the entire league behind him on his shoulders. Without question, the best thing coming from this league, while the league was in an excellent place, let's not forget, at this time. I just think when it comes to one player, one man, has there been somebody as influential as him in Scottish club football in living memory?
Oh, can I just say, I like getting his thoughts on it. Obviously, I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but just to remind people as well that Henrik Larsson, I've actually got a DVD at home, which is every single goal he scored in his career. He's such a fascinating study, because Henrik Larsson almost gave up playing football. He obviously started off in Sweden, played for Högberg, Helsingborg, then moved to Feyenoord in the Eredivisie. Now, when it came to the end, he didn't do too well at Feyenoord, and he was coming to the end of his time there, and he was almost going to go back to Sweden and pack in professional football. That's how bad it got for him. That was 1997, and Finn Janssen got word of this, and he thought, well, you know, I think I can get this guy's confidence back again. Larsson's confidence was on the floor at that time. He was ready to pack it all in, and then I said Finn Janssen came in and rescued him, signed him for £650,000, and the rest is history. But I thought maybe Enda can give you some, you know, specialising in regards to his standing in Scottish football and world football.
Just on that, Steve-O, when you go through the DVD of Henrik Larsson, where does this goal rank?
It's his best. It's his best.
Is it?
No doubt. Yeah. Like he scored some other brilliant goals. You might even say better quality. I know. I would say, because there's so much to do with that. Like it's not just a case of having a king at the goal. Point Kerr might say there's a few touches involved. There's a lot of skill involved, and yeah, it's definitely his best.
And do you want to come in on that? What's it's obviously something that we look at from a very different point of view. I'm sure you're kind of in the same boat as me, that I actually can't remember the first time I saw this. I can't remember if I was watching this game live, to be totally honest. But you know the goal, and it's something that we are all unbelievably familiar with. You just don't know when you were introduced to it or when it happened. It's just a part of life.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to reiterate kind of what Steve was saying. I was a massive Celtic and Henrik Larsson fan growing up, and even this goal is so iconic to me that in TY, when you do all the different projects or whatever, in art, I actually painted a portrait of Henrik Larsson's celebration after this goal. I still have it.
Where is this? We need to see this.
It looks nothing like him. The only thing that I got right were the dreadlocks and probably the background. But
and the jersey is pretty easy to draw as well.
The jersey, which we'll get to, is absolutely amazing as well. But Yeah, Henrik Larsson, although the Scottish game was at a very strong stage at this point in time, I do want to hammer that home. Celtic were in a UEFA Cup final 2 years after this, and Rangers likewise a few years later. So the game was at a very strong stage in Scotland at this time, and he was by far and away the best player to play in it. He scored 53 goals in all competitions in this season. He scored 35 league goals that year. And like Steve-O, I don't have the DVD, but if you go onto YouTube, if you're bored, look up all of Henrik Larsson's goals for Celtic. The quality, the differences in the different skills. He had left foot, he had right foot. I just seen from his second goal in this game, he could header the ball as well for a small man. He had a strong work ethic. And I think when you listen to different players, I know there's a lot of nonsense out there, but you can actually verify these through books. Some of the players who played with him later on in his career just spoke about the aura of playing with this legend of the game. And the fact that he, like you said, most of the time that he was a legend was the time at Celtic, but you hear Barcelona players who he was there for such a short time and he helped them win the Champions League. And then you hear Alex Ferguson. If Alex Ferguson is giving you a bit of a paragraph in his book and it's all good, then you know you're doing something right. He wrote in his book about how when Henrik Larsson came in, that even the players who had won technically more than him because they had won Premier Leagues and they had won FA Cups, doubles, trebles, and they were looking at Henrik Larsson like, I can't believe I'm sitting in the dressing room with Henrik Larsson at the minute. That's the standing in the game that he had worldwide, not just in Scotland. So he's an absolute legend. He did an interview recently with Sky Sports, which is pretty interesting as well. He kind of details what Steve was saying about how he wasn't in a great place when he signed for Celtic, and Wyn Jansen actually had played a massive role in his career. He brought him to Feyenoord, and then he brought him with him to Celtic then after a few years when he heard he was available. So thank God for Wyn Jansen.
Absolutely. I think even if we reflected on this game and Henrik Larsson was never a part of Scottish football, we would still reflect on Scottish football as being in an incredibly good place at this time. But yet, despite that, we have Henrik Larsson so far ahead of everybody else in a very strong league at this time, which just shows the world-class talents he had. Well, before we get on to secret man of the match, Larsson was the actual man of the match. I'm just going to throw this out there. Is there a question between Henrik Larsson and Zlatan Ibrahimovic for you two, in terms of the best Swedish striker we've seen in our lifetimes?
Oh, it's absolutely Henrik Larsson.
I'm just checking. Steve, I presume you go along with that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, Larsson all the way.
Grant. Just double checking. I'm sure nobody would disagree with that. I'd be on your side there as well. Right, secret man of the match. As I say, Larsson is the actual man of the match. So I'm going to lead this one off and just say Bobby Petta. I think he was brilliant. I don't think it's too much of a left field suggestion. I think Charlie Nicholas brings him up afterwards the co-coms actually bring it up and say that he should have probably been in with a shot at getting it, but Larsson's goal was just too good to ignore. Martin O'Neill has transformed this lad, is the line to give about Bobby Petta. So how much of an overperformance from Bobby Petta's baseline was this, Steve-O?
Yeah, look, he was massively disappointing under John Barnes the previous season. That was just it was a horrendous year for Celtic, and Bobby Petta was just he was awful. He didn't really make any huge contributions, but O'Neill, whatever magic O'Neill was able to sprinkle across players back in those days when he had that ability to get inside players' heads, Martin O'Neill, it obviously worked on Bobby Petta. And it's worth remembering as well, you might have seen during the match footage, Louis van Gaal, who was the Dutch manager at that time, called Bobby Petta up. Unfortunately for Petta, he had a bad injury before he could actually get his first cap. But I've no doubt he probably would have become a Dutch international if it hadn't been for that injury.
Van Gaal is actually at this. He's at this Old Firm game, and he looks like Neo from The Matrix.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, those glasses, unbelievable. That lovely cream suit as well. He was but I was partly kind of thinking Paul Lambert might have got the secret man of the match, but obviously he went off injured in that game. Paul Lambert, I thought he was kind of pulling all the strings in the centre midfield.
Absolutely.
And people have to remember as well, a Champions League winner, Paul Lambert, with Borussia Dortmund in 1997 as well, three years previously. He was a fantastic footballer. But yeah, I would say I'd agree with you on. I think Bobby Petta, secret man of the match. I think it's worth mentioning Luba Moravcik as well. I thought he was excellent, but I'd agree with you, Bobby Petta.
Well, just on Paul Lambert, I think it's a fantastic shout. I think he was due to become secret man of the match had he lasted the game. I just love the way how he's basically gets killed, is on the stretcher, and it's like, God, I'm looking at it, I'm like, God, does Paul Lambert play football again after this moment? Like, how long more does his career go on? And then he's like back up and scores a goal afterwards, and then of course he's back and he's dead again and stretched it off. It looked like an absolutely horrific injury. I don't know how he managed to get it back on the pitch, and like I kind of spotted that as well. He's like,
oh, you have to remember, I think around that time they brought in the rule where no matter what the injury was, you had to get taken off the stretch. And I think it was just to hurry on players who might have been trying to feign injury, trying to run the clock down. As far as I can remember, I think that was around the time where they'd said that everybody has to come off on the stretcher just to keep the game moving quickly.
And who have you gone for here, secret man of the match?
I think Bobby Petta is probably overall the better player on the pitch throughout the game. Like I think he had a role in 3 goals, if I'm counting correctly. Like Steve was saying, Luba Moravcik was also excellent, and I think one thing that Celtic fans will remember Lubo for is his dead balls. That he was a dead ball specialist, so you can see that from his corners. I think Chris Sutton definitely deserves a shout in this as well. It's his first Old Firm game. Yes, his first goal was a mile offside. But he scored 2 goals in an Old Firm on his first Old Firm performance, and then he also set up a couple of goals, and he was a good presence up front for Celtic. So I think he is definitely in with a shot.
I was reading some of the CelticWiki.com, and they were saying Chris Sutton scored a goal in just 51 seconds, a record for fastest goal scored in a Celtic versus Rangers match. Despite Dick Advocaat's attempts to call the first goal offside, the video evidence proves otherwise. So I'm sorry, Enda, but the CelticWiki.com disagrees with you. They were saying it was a perfectly good goal, Chris Sutton.
In that case, I will take that back. But yeah, I think VAR would definitely have ruled this a goal.
Who was the best Rangers player on the pitch, Enda?
It's a tough one. I think Giovanni van Bronckhorst was quite good. Neil McCann was decent enough as well. Despite conceding 6 goals, and bear with me on this, I actually thought Amoroso was quite good in centre defence as well. Overall, I would say it's probably Van Bronckhorst because he played a pivotal role in midfield for them, and to be honest, he's probably their best player in that squad as well.
Was Dick Advocaat a good Rangers manager, Steve-O?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know there would have been obviously the Dutch influence there. He obviously, see, the thing about Dick Advocaat was he would have had the influence to be able to sign all these big Dutch players to bring them in. I'm trying to remember now how many titles he won with Rangers. I think it was two Premier League titles and 2 Scottish Cups. So it was 2 doubles in the previous 2 years. But then I think he moved on. I can't remember now actually where he moved on to following that. But most definitely, he had them playing fantastic football.
He was on to the Netherlands after that then.
So, yeah, it was the Dutch. Yeah. So, absolutely, he was a successful manager. Won 2 doubles with Rangers. They were a very good footballing side. And of course, actually, I think Barry Ferguson deserves a nod there as well. When you're kind of talking about I know Enda spoke about that brilliant pass he made in the build-up to the offside goal. But I thought Ferguson played really well. People, I suppose, only remember Barry Ferguson. A lot of people might only remember him from his time down at Blackburn Rovers, which wasn't great, but he was a super player. And I think Dick Advocaat was a great coach for Barry Ferguson in helping him get to a pretty high level in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Barry Ferguson was the first player that I actually genuinely hated. That's how good he was. I think the skinhead look, which was probably a little bit before his time. I know David Beckham had a skinhead a couple of years later, but Barry Ferguson, genuinely, I had a despise for him that was it still probably hasn't been matched, and that I suppose there's a little bit of admiration in that hatred.
Yeah, and fear, I'd imagine. The original skinhead, I think it's fair to say, it suited him down to the ground. What do we think of his red card? Was it a bit harsh?
Well, out of all the challenges in the game, then I know it's a deliberate handball, and he actually did that a couple of minutes beforehand as well, so maybe that's why the referee decided to actually book him this time. I thought it was a bit harsh, but yeah, there was definitely some tackles that were more deserving of a red card. There was one on Bobby Petta in the second half that was just a studs into the knee challenge, and he was down for a while. I think it was Neil McCann that put that challenge in, but that was a dreadful challenge. There was also one on Van Bronckhorst from Jackie McNamara down the left wing that was a horrific challenge as well. Van Bronckhorst was off the pitch for a good while after that.
Right. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, just it's where I think Ferguson, that second yellow card, I think was more so. I think he might have given the referee some abuse. So I think the ref just lost patience with him, whipped out the yellow card. But it's just interesting to note as well, Barry Ferguson, who I was trying to work out, he's born in 78, so he was 21, 22 when that match took place. And he took all that anger and he bottled it up and he let it out that evening because Barry Ferguson was actually arrested on the night of that game. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, go on. What happened?
I'm just reading the BBC News report from that Monday, the 28th of August, 2000. Police have confirmed that Rangers star Barry Ferguson was injured during a street brawl after his team's 6-2 drubbing at the hands of Old Firm rivals Celtic. A Strathclyde police spokeswoman said the 22-year-old, who was sent off during the Sunday derby, suffered an eye injury during the fracas. In all, 62 arrests were made and 2 incidents of violence followed the high-scoring match at Celtic Park in the east end of Glasgow. 14 people were arrested at the game and a further 48 afterwards. In the main, they were charged with minor disorder offences and a number were expected to appear in court on Monday. I'd imagine that courtroom was a pretty entertaining place to be that Monday. That
night looked like it was a pretty good night in Glasgow. If you look at the Daily Record newspaper the next morning, there's a headline, and I'm sure people who were watching the game will have spotted Noel Gallagher at the Old Firm. Headline the next morning from the Daily Record: drugs raid on Liam Hotel. Police were called to a party attended by Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher yesterday after drugs complaints. They turned up at the Glasgow's Malmaison Hotel after staff claimed that revellers were taking drugs. The incident occurred in the hotel's brasserie bar, where band members and their friends were partying after the festival in the city. It is understood that several guests complained about the smell of marijuana at the bar, and another guest claimed to have spotted signs of drug use. Liam Gallagher and Scots-born Primal Scream singer Bobby Gillespie had been among those partying in the bar, but neither were linked to the incident, of course, and Gallagher had left to return to the hotel where he was staying, to Devonshire. So it was a good night for the Gallaghers as well in Glasgow that night. So plenty happening, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, Glasgow was the place to be that night, I think.
Clearly was. What a night. We missed out on that one. Let's move on to trending. So we go through the trends that were noticeable at the time. I'm just going to lead this one off with direct football. Like, there was clearly a preponderance of great talent within the Celtic team. They could have played any way they wanted, maybe. But sometimes the way the football was going at that moment, it was just better to just lump it forward and see what way it breaks. And that's what happened with Henrik Larsson's chip goal. It came from route one ball right on top of the head of Chris Sutton. So that's one of the things that I noticed. Not as much working through the channels as we might be used to now. I'm not sure what you guys have spotted.
Yeah, well, that was probably one of mine as well. It's just the big man, little man up front that used to be a thing back then, where you had the likes of Chris Sutton up front to head the ball down, sort of like what a Giroud does, because Chris Sutton, I definitely don't want to put him into the bracket of just a big man that was no good with his feet, because he was actually very good with his feet, but at that stage he was definitely utilised for his height and his strength, and getting Henrik Larsson on the ball as much as he possibly could. I think every single time that Gould caught the ball or got the ball into his hands, the first thing it wasn't even when the game got into the dying embers, it wasn't like sit on the ball and waste time. It was get the ball into the opposition half as quick as possible. Yeah.
What about you, Steve? What have you got?
Yeah, it's what when you go with trending, like I suppose the player cam thing was, for me, was that it's, it was kind of, I don't know if you're talking about maybe the style of the way the players are playing at the time. The back three, I suppose, another interesting. Martin O'Neill brought from his time at Leicester City as well. But I suppose I'd probably go with Enda as well. Just the two striker thing, really, which is gone now. Isn't it? Like, we don't see any kind of big man partnerships in football anymore. And yeah, I'll take that one.
Well, what about the jerseys, lads?
Yeah, I had a couple of things noted as well, apart from the style of the play. Just the style of the jerseys and just generally how cool the players look. If you like, Stilian Petrov for me is that era's, say, Xabi Alonso, where everyone's just like, oh, he just looks so cool when he's on the ball. The fact that they're all wearing, well, the footballers, so the likes of Stilian Petrov, Van Bronckhorst, are wearing the Predator Manias that Zidane made famous 2 years earlier. The NTL Celtic jersey is probably the best Celtic jersey in recent memory. The Rangers one was horrible. If you notice, this is the stage where Celtic and Rangers both had the same sponsorships, but Nike made the Rangers jerseys and Umbro made the Celtic jerseys, and that used to be a big sort of, when Rangers were dominating, that used to be a big sort of pole to poke Celtic fans with, that you're only made by Umbro, so therefore we're better. We're made by Nike. The global, the bigger brand wants to sponsor our jersey, so therefore we're the better side. And to an extent, that's happening now with Celtic, where Celtic are made by New Balance, and the Hummel jerseys for Rangers were made an absolute laughingstock last year, because Celtic fans couldn't believe how far Rangers had fallen, the fact that they had to get Hummel to sponsor their jerseys.
I have to say, Hummel are fantastic, making myself a few of their jackets home. Actually, jerseys as well. Billy Dodds was a bit like Billy Dodds and Neil McCann, I thought, on Rangers side. They were like Michael only. They like the jerseys were about 3 times too big for them. They look ridiculous. Like they actually look like young, maybe under 12s footballers playing on a pitch with a load of senior men. It was crazy.
Could I just ask, Enda, have you ever thought that a Rangers jersey, have you ever looked at it and been like, it's nice, fancy that?
No.
Like, I presume
no.
that you just hate I presume you would say that all the Rangers jerseys are crap.
They're all awful.
I genuinely, but the Hummel thing is real. Trust me on this, because there is even I like Hummel in general, but in terms of the fan zones and the Celtic Twitter pages, they were laughing at Rangers when they got Hummel. Also, it didn't help the fact that some of the Rangers players were wearing different, like the Hummel jerseys didn't match, so some of the badges were on different areas on the jerseys. So it's a real thing. Trust me on it.
Let's move on. Sorry, go on.
Bohemian shirts were made by Hummel for a fair few seasons, and they were fantastic.
Good brand is what you're saying. Dependable.
Listen, I like Hummel. I genuinely, I think they make quite nice jerseys, except for when they're Rangers. But they did really make a huge error when they were making their Ranger jerseys, because they were all over the place in the first season.
Let's move on to most jarring, and it's kind of a fashion thing that jarred with me the most. Union Jack hoodies. Is this still a thing?
Oh. I can't remember seeing any, but I'm sure there definitely are. We're in Brexit era right now, so I would say there definitely is someone out there that is willing to wear a Union Jack hoodie.
Like, obviously, the Celtic fans have continued a good kind of tradition of sporting tricolours and things like that. Like, I don't recall the Union Jack being as prevalent. I think every Rangers fan almost had a Union Jack hoodie on. But I think it might be more down to the point you made earlier on, that there was just a bigger allocation of tickets for Rangers fans on this occasion. So maybe I was like, whoa, that's just kind of overwhelming when I saw it. But that's the only thing that really jarred with me. Like, outside of that, it's a game that's obviously of its time, insofar as it features quite a lot of direct football. But I think outside of that, to be honest with you lads, this is a game that actually kind of sits quite well, even with eyes from 2020 on it. Like, I don't think there's too much that you look at and you're like, oh, that's really weird, that's really unusual. There are obviously the little quirks that existed at the time, but it's nothing major. You don't really say, wow, that's been a long 20 years.
Yeah, maybe the online technology thing might be the one, because as Enda spoke about earlier on, the fact that the Raila goal, there just seemed to be only one angle, and it was a really poor one. And I don't know how Charlie Nicholas, in his halftime analysis, seemed pretty certain about that being a goal. I don't know how he could figure it out from the angle that he had, because it wasn't very clear. But I suppose that's the thing that you're kind of thinking nowadays. We wouldn't say that we'd have a definitive call on that, because we've got online technology now as well. I don't know if this comes under the jarring headline, but I think something maybe that just kind of hit me watching the game, which is, I don't want to kind of make people too sad, but it was just the whole Fernando Ricksen thing. And I think when he passed away last year, I think it was something that even, whatever colour jersey you were wearing, both teams can give respect to players in those kind of times. Obviously, Fernando Ricksen played as a full-back for Rangers for a couple of seasons. And looking at him out there on that day in the prime of his life, absolutely playing brilliant stuff. And unfortunately lost a battle with motor neuron disease last year, which is such a tragic way for a man like him to go. And I think it was just, I think it just hit me a little bit watching him in that game on the video. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. I think everybody can give respect to a really great footballer like Fernando Ricksen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Like on a similar vein as well, you obviously got Jackie McNamara and the peak of his health out there as well. Like he was unbelievable in this game, and it is kind of weird, isn't it, when you watch a game like that? Obviously with Ricksen, it's a terrible situation, and the last time you hear that name before watching this game is probably in the headlines about him having passed away. And then similarly with McNamara having had his bleed in the brain so recently, you kind of hear these names and then you're immediately transported to watching these guys back in the pomp of their career and the peak of their health. It's a really good point. I never thought of that, but I guess it is kind of jarring because naturally it is the first thing you think of. We are watching this in the year 2020. We can't pretend to just leave away what we now know when you're watching this game. So yeah, it's a good point. We should move on then to the reaction to the sliding doors, to the context here. Any final thoughts you might have? We almost started this whole thing with the reaction, the Martin O'Neill interview. I think I wanted to play it at the very top because it's just a brilliant piece of audio. It's Martin O'Neill being Martin O'Neill, and if we accept that it's okay for us to talk about this from the point of view of 2020, we should also talk about this from the point of view of watching this as Republic of Ireland fans and our own relationship with Martin O'Neill as football fans, and how we always use it as a stick to beat him with, especially in the media, that he dealt with Tony O'Donoghue terribly and all that sort of thing. This is the way Martin O'Neill was. This is the way he's always been. He's never been different. He was always brash with reporters, even after winning a game 6-2. And kind of looking back at this, seeing him leap all over the sideline the way he did a couple of times with the Republic of Ireland as well. I wonder, does it change your view at all, just reminding yourself of Martin O'Neill as a Celtic manager and how unbelievably successful he was with them?
I don't think it does for me, because I was able to separate the two, and it got to the stage where you can definitely remember what he did with Celtic and also be critical of what he was doing at Ireland. You definitely have to separate the two. But definitely within Celtic circles, there were people who were very, very, very loyal to Martin O'Neill for a long time in Ireland, simply down to the fact that they did not want to criticise him because he is a Celtic legend. He's Celtic go on to win the treble after this year. This is honestly the biggest year for Celtic in living memory for a lot of fans. This is the biggest moment, the biggest year for them, and for a man like Martin O'Neill to bring that, you're never going to be critical of him then later on in the year when he's starting to drift a little bit. But I think one thing that is probably a little bit jarring for this is just the fact that if you look at Martin O'Neill's career after this, and the success he has with Celtic and the diversity of his teams and the way that they played, it's just such a bygone era, because he was able to have so much success and then he tried to replicate that 10 years later, and the game had moved on so much that he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, is that symptomatic of Martin O'Neill not evolving enough with time? I always think it's a very, very hard thing to suggest that a manager who has had a fair degree of success already in his career suddenly change with the times. I think if any of you or I were a football manager and we've had the success Martin O'Neill has had, to kind of rip up what has been done and move with the times is a much harder thing to do rather than just say, and perhaps he deserves a little more credit. I think that, what we've left with Martin O'Neill as Republic of Ireland football fans is kind of a very different thing to just the Celtic-only fans and what their memories of O'Neill would have been.
It also explains a little bit of his behaviour, though, when you think about it, because I know that some of his treatment with Tony O'Donoghue was a bit out of line, but when he was brazen and when he was angry at being questioned by journalists is because he has the success in his locker. He brought Celtic to a European Cup final, or a UEFA Cup final, sorry, and he has had the success, and basically probably had the thought, like, who are you to question me? I have had success in my previous years as manager, sort of like Jose Mourinho now. He clung to the past, but as a manager with a game that evolves so quickly, if you don't evolve, you die. And that's unfortunately what happened to Martin O'Neill with Ireland. And I suppose if you look sort of a revisionist version of Martin O'Neill's career at Ireland, it was okay, it was decent enough, but at the end of the day, Ireland ended up in a very bad position because of his management. Not entirely because of down to his management, but he definitely played a role in it.
Yeah, I think as well it's important to remember that the players that O'Neill signed when he got to Celtic, and if you look at all the players that he signed, you know, people, I suppose, would have questioned Martin O'Neill managing the Republic of Ireland, and there was the constant, I suppose, analysis over his game plans and the fact that the game plans were actually quite limited, that he didn't really give players too much instruction before they went out. But that was perfect at Celtic, because if you look at the players that he had and the players that he signed, there was a lot of big characters in that Celtic dressing room, like the likes of Larsson, the likes of Chris Sutton, the likes of Neil Lennon that came in that December. I'm trying to think back now.
Alan Thompson came in.
Sorry?
Alan Thompson, centre midfield, came in. He was a massive character.
So a lot of those players were very strong characters in their own right. I would say Martin O'Neill didn't have to give them an awful lot of instruction before they went out onto the pitch. So I think that's why it worked at Celtic. That's why it worked at Leicester City, and the same at Aston Villa, when you had that bit of success there, getting them pretty high up the Premier League table at a time when other teams had a lot more money and were dominating. But regards, if you go back to the sliding doors point, you know, Rangers have dominated for so long. Celtic had a couple of false starts made under Billy McNeil, Vin Janssen. Some managers were there. It didn't work out for them. There came a time, I suppose, when people also maybe looked down their nose at Martin O'Neill's achievements in Scotland, because they just thought, well, it's only Scottish football. Well, if it was that easy, there would have been other managers that would have went there and had the same success. What Martin O'Neill achieved at Celtic was incredible. I think he will, you know, I suppose I worked as a journalist covering the Republic of Ireland when Martin O'Neill was in charge, and it was hard because that man was a bit of a hero to me when I was a Celtic supporter, and I loved what he did. I had a huge admiration for what he did. I wasn't really a huge admirer of what he did with the Republic of Ireland, and it was hard to, I suppose, to separate that, which you do have to when you're working as a journalist. But, you know, I think he should always be remembered as a legend at Celtic, because he achieved great things. He won so many trophies, and it was because he was a good manager. It was because he signed good players, and it was because he got that team playing really good football. They went on after that game. They obviously got beaten by Rangers in November derby, 5-1. I think that's a bit of an outlier in the grand scheme of things. From that result, basically, it was the end of Rangers. You know, we know what's happened since then with the club, obviously going into administration, that kind of thing. But for Celtic, they went on, won 3 of the next titles in the next 4 seasons. 3 titles in the next 4 seasons under O'Neill. Henrik Larsson was the top scorer in all 4 of those seasons. Larsson going on to win the Golden Boot, of course, that season as well. You know, he turned around Chris Sutton's career as well. Chris Sutton, after having brilliant spells with Norwich City and Blackburn, he had that failure with Chelsea, and O'Neill signed him for Celtic and absolutely turned his career around. I think something Chris Sutton will always thank Martin O'Neill for. So it definitely was a sliding doors moment, I think, and a turning point for the club.
Last question then, lads. Is this game over or underrated? I'm going to start off by saying it's underrated. I had kind of forgotten about the game until you lads suggested it, and watching it back is marvellous. I don't think we give this era of Scottish football actually enough credit, to be honest. I think that, as we've already mentioned, it can often be reviewed as the Henrik Larsson show, but the quality here is brilliant. I think that if you kind of break it down and talk about the style of football as being quite direct or whatever, I don't think that's a fair point about Scottish football at the time, because I think that was football at the time. I think if you watch any Premier League game from that era, the quality isn't going to be a million miles different. Of course, Premier League is a higher quality, but at its peak, the Old Firm derby would be able to give it a bit of a match. I thought it was fantastic. I think it's underrated. I think there are so many different storylines going into the game, so many different storylines, as you've outlined there, Steve-O, coming out of the game, and then just some sparklings of gold dust throughout. Henrik Larsson in particular, absolutely underrated for me.
Yeah, I agree with... Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, no, look, I'll be short, sweet. I think it's actually really good or interesting that you've said that, because I think maybe for myself, who was immersed in the whole kind of green and white thing back then, it's hard to, I suppose, maybe give a more kind of arm's length view of it. But I think what you said there, Eoin, is pretty spot on. The quality of football being played in that game was absolutely fantastic. Some brilliant moments. I suppose it's probably more of an enjoyable game for Celtic fans to watch back on. Maybe not so much for the Rangers fans, but I think anybody neutral, if they go back and watch that game in full, I think they'll really enjoy it the same way as you have, Owen. I think you're spot on. It's definitely underrated.
And
yeah, I completely agree. Before I actually watched the whole thing back, the highlights don't actually show every goal in the game, so you forget that Rangers scored a second goal at all in the first half, and you just forget about some of the tackles, some of the play that was in it. So yeah, I completely agree. I think this is an underrated game. You're looking at some of the players, maybe not at their peak at the time, but getting there. So you have the likes of Larsson, who this was his sliding doors moment. This is when he becomes a global superstar. You have Chris Sutton getting his career back together after Chelsea. Stilian Petrov, we all know what he did to the Premier League when he went to the Premier League. He was still as classy as he was out in this pitch. So there's some quality football on show, and it's just start to finish, it's an entertaining game, including Jim White, who, can I mention, was quite scary when he was young looking. he was still grey, and he still had his voice, so it's still the same person, but he just has a baby face. So he looks the exact same, but just with a baby face. It's actually a little bit uncomfortable.
I think on that note, I think we might leave it there on Jim White's scary. Is it kind of like Chucky kind of scary, is it, or what sort of thing?
It's kind of like, it looks like what if Jim White got Botox now and then sat in a sunbed for too long. That's kind of what he looks like.
That is quite the image. Terrifying, if we didn't need any more terror in our lives right now. And listen, and then Steve-O, thanks a million for joining me on this journey, for watching it back. I would highly recommend it for anybody sitting at home with nothing to do over the next few days. Just give it a Google there, Celtic Rangers 2000. This has been the Classic Game Club. We're very open to any of your suggestions. You can tweet any of us individually, or tweet @OffTheBall if you've got any suggestions for stuff for us to go back and watch. We've got all the time in the world to watch it back over the next few weeks, unfortunately. We'll chat to you next time. Good luck for now.